Hello, welcome to another episode of Prehistory in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse, and before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons and our channel members over at our sister channel, History in the Dark. You are the reason why this content remains big chungus. And today, we're gonna talk about something that was big, a version of a present-day animal that was much larger than the present-day animal, generally speaking. A frog. Yes, a prehistoric giant froggy. Ribbit. Rabbit! Croak. This is the story of Beelzebufo, or the devil frog, because sometimes paleontologists have no chill. Beelzebufo ampinga was a rather large species of prehistoric frog that was first described in 2008. It is commonly known as the devil frog, devil toad, or frog from hell because it was, of course, big chungus. They lived in the late Cretaceous period, and their fossil remains have been recovered from the Maverano Formation in Madagascar. They are assumed to have lived roughly 66 to 70 million years ago, and the fossilized remains of this thing actually were initially discovered back in 1993 by David W. Krauss. It just took 14 years to assemble enough data to publicize the remains in any solid way. Other scientists involved with this were Susan E. Evans and Marce E. H. Jones. Krauss himself was also part of the final publication, which happened to be in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is a peer-reviewed scientific journal. Beelzebufo, if you couldn't guess, is a portmanteau of Beelzebub, which is a demon, sometimes called Lord of the Flies, as well as Bufo, which is Latin for toad, and ampinga means shield, so devil, toad, shield. The shield doesn't really fit, but whatever. A total of 75 isolated fossils of partial bone fragments have been found so far, and some portions of the articulated skull are also known. Researchers have actually been able to reconstruct parts of the skeleton, including nearly the entire skull, but as is the case with many fossils, the remains have been very fragmentary, but they do have enough to get a rough idea of what this thing looked like and just how big it was. From head to tail, it could have been as long as 20 centimeters. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but this is a frog! That's larger than most people's hands, just so we're clear. Additionally, it may have been slightly armored. Parts of the skull roof show a rugous external surface. That indicates that parts of it may have had bony scales, called scutes, to protect the animal. Additionally, the skull sutures are actually open, even in the largest specimens available, which indicates that it actually could have grown even bigger than we currently have remains to prove. It was most likely a predator, because it's a frog, and frogs love flies. Though this thing probably would not have eaten that many flies, necessarily. Its expansive mouth allowed it to eat relatively large prey, even juvenile dinosaurs. The bite force measurements on this thing suggest that a Beelzebufo, with a skull width of about 15.4 centimeters, that's 6.1 inches, may have been able to apply between 500 to 2,200 newtons. That's between 110 and 490 pounds. Let me just stress at this point, this is a frog! 2,000 newtons isn't actually enough to break the bones in, say, your leg, but if it were to, say, bite your hand, that might be a bit of a different situation. And at the very least, it would hurt like heck! The fossils, like I said, were found in Madagascar, which separated from the coast of Somalia in the earliest stages of the late Jurassic period, while it was still attached to India, in fact. Beelzebufo resembles horned frogs of South America, which raised the possibility that they could have a close biogeographic link between Madagascar and South America during the Cretaceous period. Beelzebufo's discovery actually reignited interest and research into skeletal variation among living members of the Ceratophoridae, which are the horned frogs from South America. Those investigations suggest that several of the similarities between this animal as well as the South American frogs, may have evolved by convergence. And yet another study in 2018 suggested that Beelzebufo, as well as other extinct frogs with traits like ceratophorids, were actually instead part of a more ancient group of Neobactriacea. Though another study in 2022 backpedaled on that, going back to the notion that Beelzebufo actually represents a taxon on the stem of a crown group of those South American horned frogs. But either way, it was a big frog! Keep in mind that the analysis so far is that this is more of a horned frog. And unlike the vast majority of frogs, which actually have weak jaws and typically consume small prey with their long tongues, horned frogs tend to ambush animals as large as themselves, and their powerful jaws play a critical role in that. They're basically the T-Rex of the frog world, is what I'm trying to say. Weight estimates put it at least 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms. Of frog! What wonders our evolutionary history has to offer. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.